It was a rainy, cold Thursday night when she knocked on his door. The sort of rain that doesn't fall, it seeps into your bones. The sort of night where you have a candle not because the electricity's been cut, but because the quiet simply weighs too much without it. Jeremiah Thomas had only just gotten a pot of beef stew simmering on the stove. The aroma permeated his small Georgia house with coziness, a combination of thyme, potatoes, and slow-cooked memories. Dinner was plain, but to him it was ritual. It was the one thing he'd maintained since his wife Teresa died 5 years ago. The children were in the living room, Jada thumbing through a library book, and Marcus constructing something with broken Legos. Jeremiah dried his hands on a towel and reached for his glass of iced tea when he heard it. 3 gentle knocks, then silence. He stood there for an instant, uncertain. His property lay well enough off the road that no one drove by unless they intended to. No deliveries, no visitors, just trees and time. He went to the front door, opened it, unlocked it, and pushed it open slow, and she was there. A young woman, not much older than 19 or 20, stood dripping wet, her jacket plastered against her arms like a second coat of rain. Her hair was a matted mess of dark curls and dripped water onto his doormat. Her face was white, eyes big, as if she'd run from something or someone. "Please," she murmured, folding her arms around her. I don't have a place to go. Just for tonight. I'll be gone by tomorrow morning." Jeremiah studied her, and then away from her towards the woods behind her. No automobile, no umbrella, no suitcases. Just this shivering girl standing in the middle of a tempest. He hesitated, not because he didn't care to assist, but because he had children within, and the world did not make it simple to trust strangers anymore, especially those who just appeared out of nowhere. Nonetheless, he recalled Teresa's words like it had been yesterday. Kindness doesn't cost a thing, Jerry. Not a thing. One act can change somebody's whole world. He looked at the girl again, how she shied away from his gaze, how her lips trembled as if she hadn't eaten in days, how she kept casting looks over her shoulder like someone was going to step out of the trees and return her to wherever she had come from. Jeremiah groaned. "Okay," he said, moving aside. "Come on in. Let's get you warm." She came in slowly, as if she couldn't believe that anyone had agreed. The warmth enveloped her like a hug inside. She blinked several times, getting used to the light, then shed her soggy jacket and wrapped it in her arms. "Your name?" he asked softly. "Elle," she said softly. "Just Elle?" "Well, Elle," Jeremiah replied, giving a slight smile. "I'm Jeremiah. My children Jada and Marcus are in the other room. We're just getting done with dinner. You hungry?" She nodded hastily, as if it pained her to confess. He took her a towel and indicated the direction of the tiny bathroom so she could get dry. As he added a second bowl to the table, scooped out stew, and sliced a piece of fresh cornbread, the children looked into the kitchen, wondering, but said nothing. When Elle emerged, she was somewhat less of a stranger and more of a specter of someone who once had a place to call home. She sat down quietly and murmured thank you before wolfing it down like the first actual meal she'd had in days. "Lost my phone and wallet," she said, not quite looking at him. "There was a misunderstanding at the bus terminal. I tried calling someone, but Jeremiah didn't push." He'd been on the planet long enough to recognize when a tale had gaps in it, but he'd also learned to recognize when a person just needed room to breathe. "Stuff happens," he said. "You're safe here tonight." Jada gave her a tentative smile. "You're safe." Marcus, too young to sense the tension in the air, simply asked her if she enjoyed Legos. Elle laughed for the first time since entering, softly, as if from long ago, and that was when Jeremiah caught sight of something. She didn't move like a girl who'd been on the streets. Her shoulders were too straight. Her sentences too measured. When she took up her spoon, she picked it up the way Teresa had always picked up hers. Precise, delicate. She thanked Jada when she handed her a napkin. She assisted Marcus in cleaning his spilled milk without complaining. And when dinner was finished, she cleared the table without anyone having to tell her. It was small, but it mattered. Later, after the kids were tucked in and the rain had settled into a steady hush against the windows, Jeremiah made up the pole, out couch with fresh sheets. "You'll be all right here," he said, handing her a blanket. "Thank you," she replied, "for trusting me." He nodded, then turned to head down the hall. But just before he disappeared into the shadows, she spoke again. "Did not even ask me who I am," she said. Jeremiah hesitated, glanced over his shoulder. "Did not have to," he said. "You were in trouble. That's all I had to know." What he did not say, what he could not have known, was that Elle was not just a lost tourist. She was the daughter of a man whose name was posted on buildings, billboards, and high-end magazines. A man who had men scouring the city at that very moment. A man who would stop at nothing to retrieve her. But for now, to Jeremiah, she was only a young girl who knocked on the rain. And sometimes that's enough for a person to be. That evening, the house was different. Not tense, not upset, but quieter, as if it were holding its breath. Jeremiah sensed it as he sat at the dinner table, serving hot stew into bowls and cutting another slice of cornbread for their visitor. Elle sat at the table with her hands in her lap. Despite warm clothes and dry hair, she was still far away, like part of her hadn't quite arrived in from the rain. She thanked him gently when he put the bowl in front of her. "Hope it's okay," he said. "It smells like home," she whispered. That surprised him a little. She ate small bites, carefully and calmly. She was not wolfing it down like someone starved for days. She ate like someone who had been taught, who knew the fork to use, who knew when to talk and when to listen. He observed her over the top of his glass as Jada and Marcus discussed school, cartoons, and the upcoming science fair. Elle smiled now and then, but otherwise remained quiet until Marcus asked, "Do you like stories?" She blinked, gazed at him. "I love stories. Can you read us one after dinner?" Jeremiah began to jump in, not wanting to put her on the spot, but she nodded. "I'd love to." When they loaded the dishes, without being reminded, Elle got up and assisted in carrying plates to the sink. Jeremiah stepped back and simply observed for a brief moment. She wasn't merely mannered. She glided, as if she'd done this previously. Waited tables, loaded the dishwasher, took care of herself without being told. Something Teresa would have picked up on instantly. Actually, as Elle was at the sink drying her hands using the kitchen towel, it hit him. She reminded him of Teresa. Not in appearance, but in vigor, in softness, that unassuming kind of power that would cause everyone around her to ease up without understanding the reason. Jada pulled out her beloved book, the one with yellowed corners and dog-eared pages, and presented it to Elle as if it were a family treasure. Elle smiled as she accepted it, then got comfortable in the squeaky old rocking chair in front of the fireplace. Jeremiah, propped against the doorway, observed as both his children huddled on the carpet in front of her, eyes open wide and eager. Elle's voice was silky, a bit melodious, as though she'd been doing it 100 times. She didn't simply read the words, she brought them alive, gave the characters voices, hesitated at just the right places, didn't go on just enough to make the room cozy and secure. And then, without even realizing it, she reached out and began to braid Jada's hair. Not the sloppy, hasty braid, but slow, reined almost by muscle memory. Jada did not blink. She leaned into it, Jeremiah's throat constricted. That was something only Teresa used to do. He put the children to bed after he told them the story. Marcus inquired if Elle would still be around come morning. "I don't know," Jeremiah replied truthfully, "but let's be grateful. She's here now." When he came back to the living room, Elle sat watching the fire, arms wrapped around herself. "And thanks for dinner," she said, "and for allowing me to read to them." "They enjoyed you," Jeremiah said, relaxing in his recliner. "Kids don't pretend." There was a moment of silence before he asked in a soft manner, "You sure you're just passing through?" She did not immediately glance at him, merely gazed at the dancing flames, her expression gentle in the light. "I just needed a break," she said after a moment, "from everything." He nodded reluctantly, though it wasn't a response. Not exactly. "Somewhere quiet," she continued. "Where people are. Good. That's all he got." He didn't prod. He'd discovered years ago that people talk when they're ready, and not a minute before. But something in what she said hung in his chest. Not the way she'd said it, but the way her eyes remained still, inscrutable. Once she had gone to bed, Jeremiah sat up for a bit, drinking lukewarm tea and hearing the fire pop. Something about Elle just didn't feel right. Not in an unpleasant way, but in a manner that provoked questions. He pulled out his old cell phone and called his brother Marvin, who'd been a city bus driver for over 2 decades. If something weird was going on in town, Marvin usually heard it first. "You heard about any missing girls?" Jeremiah asked. "Name's Elle, about 20, light skin, curly hair, quiet. Kentum, number Jember?" "Not off the top of my head," Marvin replied, yawning. "But I'll ask around in the morning. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Jeremiah replied. "Just had a visitor tonight. Something about her don't add up." "Well, is she dangerous?" "No," Jeremiah replied, speaking almost reflexively. "Just out of class. She don't walk like someone who's accustomed to hard times, speaks proper, table manners, posture, all that. Maybe she's just lost. Maybe." Even after he'd hung up the phone, though, Jeremiah couldn't shake the feeling. He'd watched others hit rock bottom. He'd assisted many of them through church or the shelter. But Elle, there was something different. She didn't appear to be someone running from poverty. She appeared to be someone running from privilege. The following morning, the house was filled with noises Jeremiah hadn't heard in years. Laughter, light footsteps, a girl humming in the kitchen. The sun shone in the windows and bathed the entire room in a warmer atmosphere. Walls smiling, somehow calm. Elle helped Jada at the counter, showing her how to stir the pancake batter from the outside in, but not too quickly, with just the right amount of pressure. Jada followed like she were being taught by an older sister. Marcus sat at the table, kicking his legs out and laughing every time a bubble burst in the skillet. When Elle flipped the pancake just so, he applauded as if she'd performed some sort of magic trick. Jeremiah leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, silently observing it all. It was normal. More than that, it felt good, like his house had come to life again. She laughed as she splashed syrup onto Marcus's plate. "That's enough sugar to send you to the moon," she teased. "I like the moon," Marcus yelled, and everyone laughed. Jeremiah couldn't help but grin. His heart was full in a manner that it had not been since the death of Teresa. He knew it would only be temporary. Elle had told him she would be leaving tomorrow morning, but for now, in this moment, all felt so right. He filled a cup with coffee and headed out onto the porch, filling his lungs with morning air, and then he saw it. A shiny black car creeping up slowly to the front of his gravel driveway. Not a sedan, not a neighbor's truck. This was a luxury vehicle, clean, quiet, and pricey. Jeremiah narrowed his gaze as the car pulled to a halt. The driver remained within, but the rear door opened, and a tall man in a navy blue suit stepped out. His hair, streaked with gray, was tidy, his footsteps hasty. He surveyed the front of the house with hard eyes that were etched with worry. A moment or so later, the other door swung open, and a woman in a suit alighted, pearls on her neck, heels too bright for country roads, clutching a phone like it was taped to her hand. She glanced around nervously, talking softly into the instrument. Jeremiah felt his gut knot up. He descended the stairs slowly, his tone steady but firm. "Can I help you?" The man raised his eyes. His voice shook with emotion. "I'm looking for my daughter," he said. "Her name is Elle Harrington." Jeremiah stopped cold. Harrington. It was like a thunderclap in his mind. Everyone knew that name. The Harringtons didn't just own hotels, they owned everything. Resorts, airports, golf courses. Even the billboard out on Highway 9 had their logo on it. Before Jeremiah could respond, he heard the screen door swing open behind him. "Dad!" Elle's voice sounded out, filled with shock and perhaps a hint of guilt. She sprinted past Jeremiah and down the stairs. The man spread his arms. "Elle!" She collapsed into them, and they stood there holding each other for a very long moment. The woman, her mother, apparently ran forward as well, tears streaming down her face. "I was so scared," the woman said. "We searched everywhere." "Sorry, Mom," Elle said, her voice cracking. Jeremiah froze on the porch. She wasn't some displaced traveler, not a runaway, not one who had fallen between the cracks. She was Harrington's daughter. Elle spun around to face him, eyes glassy with tears. "Jeremiah, I didn't lie," she told him softly. "I just didn't tell you all of it." He didn't respond. And he didn't respond. Just nodded once, slowly. The man moved forward, extending his hand. "I'm Charles Harrington," he replied. You've done something for my family that I can never repay." Jeremiah was finally able to speak. "She came in the rain," he replied. "All I did was open the door." Charles nodded. "And sometimes that's everything." The mother stepped forward next. "We had no idea where she was. No phone, no card, no messages. She vanished after the charity gala 2 nights ago. We were frightened." Elle avoided eye contact. "I didn't want to frighten anyone," she whispered. I didn't want to be Elle Harrington for a bit. I wanted to feel like a person." Jeremiah looked back over the screen door where his children laughed on in the kitchen, oblivious to what was happening outside. "Looks like you were," he said. "Just a person, and that's the way we treated you." Her father smiled faintly. "You have a beautiful family, Mr. Thomas. It means the world to me that she found safety with you." There was a pause, one of those moments when time feels thick and still. "I should go with them now," Elle said gently. "They've been looking for me." Jeremiah gave a short nod. "You'll be all right." She smiled, though tears touched the corners of her eyes. "I already am." She turned to him, wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, sudden, genuine, and for an instant he could see her as she really was, merely a girl in search of somewhere to breathe. Then she got into the car. As the sleek car drove off, Jeremiah stood silently on his porch, hands shoved into pockets, the steam from his coffee curling up into the crisp morning air. Jada stuck her head out. "Dad, where'd Elle go?" He breathed deeply. "She had to go home, baby girl," he whispered. "But I think she'll remember this place for a long, long time." And in the back of his mind, he knew. So would he. The house was too quiet after Elle departed. Jada didn't question much, simply returned to her bedroom and gazed at the vacant space on the rug where Elle had spent time reading stories the previous evening. Marcus continued gazing out the window in hopes she would return with more pancakes and another game to be played. Jeremiah sat out on the front porch for a good while that afternoon, hands clasped together, coffee gone cold. He was a man who did not say much, but his mind thought deeply, and no way he could turn it around in his head. He could not escape one simple fact: Elle didn't flee from danger. She fled from expectation. It wasn't until much later that night, just after the sun set, that he received a knock on the door again. There was no rain, no fear, no silence this time. It was Charles Harrington, only now. The suit was shed, replaced with jeans and a simple button down. No driver, no wife, just a father, wanting to say something he hadn't quite had the chance to yet. Jeremiah opened the door cautiously. "Mr. Harrington, please," he said. "Call me Charles." Jeremiah nodded and moved aside. "Coffee's cold, but the porch is open." Charles smiled weakly, and then sat down on the top step next to him. For a moment, neither of them said a word. They just stood and watched the wind make the leaves rustle in the trees. After a while, Charles spoke. "She told us everything." Jeremiah waited. "She told me she didn't want to be groomed anymore. Told me every second of her life was a performance, someone else dictating her lines. Her mother and I thought we were doing the right thing. Boarding schools, language lessons, formal parties. But at some point, I think we lost sight of the fact that she was still a child." Jeremiah nodded once. Charles exhaled heavily. "She told me your home felt to her what she'd always imagined family might be. Dinner at a table, children who laugh without considering headlines, a father who hears." "She's a good kid," Jeremiah said softly. "She is," Charles said. "But I think I forgot that." The two men sat in silence once more. Then Charles pulled out of his coat pocket a folded piece of paper. "She left this with me. Told me it was for you. Told me it was for you." Jeremiah unfolded the note slowly and read Elle's handwriting, neat, considerate as she was. "Thanks for not asking so many questions, for allowing me to sit around your fire, eat your food, and pretend just for a little time that I was a part of something normal. You didn't judge me. You didn't attempt to repair me. You merely made room for me to breathe. That's more than most people in my life have given me. Tell Jada I loved your story. Tell Marcus you make the best syrup towers. And thank you for making me feel safe. Elle." Jeremiah read the note twice, then folded it up carefully and put it in his pocket like something valuable. "She didn't have to write that," he said. "I think she needed to," Charles said. Then his voice caught a little. "You sheltered her like she was your own. No cameras, no announcements, just quiet goodness. That's not common, Mr. Thomas." Jeremiah shifted toward him, gaze unwavering. "That's what good people do," he said. Charles nodded. "You showed my daughter what true goodness is." He stopped and added, "And you showed me too." As he stood up to leave, Charles glanced over the porch, at the small house that had cradled his daughter in times of greatest need. "She told me you reminded her of her grandfather," Charles said with a grin. "Told me you listen like him used to. No rush, no judgment, just patience." Jeremiah's expression softened. "Sometimes that's all a person needs." Charles held out his hand once more. It wasn't the billionaire's handshake this time, it was the handshake of a father, chastened. "Thank you," he said. Jeremiah accepted it and nodded quietly. "Take care of her," he said matter-of-factly. Charles moved away, stepped down the stairs, and dissolved into the dying light. As the door clicked shut, Jeremiah stood there for an instant, cradling the note in the palm of his hand. He had no idea what the future held or if Elle would ever be back, but he did know this. She'd arrived at his door lost and gone with something she'd been without her entire life. Not wealth, not liberty, connection. The kind that doesn't need last names or blood tests. The kind that's made in the still moments, around bowls of stew, in the sleeping stories, and in the braided hair. And although his home now stood quiet and empty, something within it had shifted. A part of Elle would remain. And perhaps, just perhaps, a part of Jeremiah had gone along with her as well. A week went by. Home life at the Thomases resumed its normal pace, or so it appeared. Jeremiah was at early mornings again, making his coffee well before dawn and stirring the same pot of stew with the same gnarled old spoon. The children were back at school, though Jada's braids were a bit less secure, and Marcus kept inquiring about whether Elle might ever return to visit. Jeremiah didn't know the answer to that. He simply smiled and replied, "Sometimes folks come visit us for a reason. Doesn't mean they must stay for it to count." There remained, though, something in the air, a subtle twist, like their house had been pulled open just slightly wider to accommodate something they didn't quite possess before. Love, of course, but also a new hope. It was a still Friday morning, a morning when nothing seemed out of the ordinary, that Jeremiah discovered it. He was bringing in the mail, sorting through the same old stack of bills, coupons, and catalogs when he noticed it. A pale cream-colored envelope addressed to him in simple, cursive handwriting. No return address, no postage, just Jeremiah Thomas, carefully printed. He opened it cautiously, his rough fingers slowly spreading out the elegant stationery within. It was a letter, familiar, handwritten, from L. Dear Jeremiah, by now the house must feel a little quieter once more. I miss it more than I thought. I miss the stew, the stories, Marcus's sticky fingers, and Jada's lovely questions. But above all, I miss how your house made me feel. Safe, seen, like I didn't have to be anything more than just me. You and your family provided for me something I hadn't known in years. Home, not the chandelier and marble floor kind, but the kind with warm kitchens, full hearts, and people who cared. I wanted to give back that kindness in the only way I knew how. Wrapped up in the envelope was another thing, a deed. Jeremiah blinked at it, not fully comprehending at first. He flipped it over, read the address. It was for a home, in the same town, still humble, but newer, larger. Large enough for the kids to each have their own rooms, an actual yard, and room for a garden, something Teresa had always hoped to plant. The note went on, I know you never requested anything. That's part of why you are so special, but I wanted to get you a gift, a thank you. The house is yours. No strings, no contracts. Just one simple wish. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep opening your door. The world needs more people like you. With love, Al Harrington. Jeremiah sat down at the kitchen table, the deed and letter resting in his calloused hand. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then he gazed out of the window to the sky and mouthed, near to under his breath, Teresa, you were right. Kindness doesn't cost a thing, but sometimes it gives you everything. The relocation wasn't long. Their old house had been good to them, but it had become cramped with age. The new house boasted soft carpets, a sunroom, and a porch that curving around the front seemed to reach out and grasp you. The children were over the moon with excitement. Marcus bolted from room to room as if he were in a castle. Jada wanted to know if she could paint her room any shade she desired. Jeremiah replied, yes. Neighbors called on the way to inquire about the new family. Some of them had seen him at church. Others had heard rumors of a big donation, although the specifics were never actually disclosed. Jeremiah didn't tell he was humble, and he also thought some blessings should remain unexplained. What he did do, however, was put Elle's letter in a plain wooden frame and hang it in the hallway beside the front door. Each time he left home, each time he came back, he saw it. A reminder that sometimes the smallest thing, opening your door, inviting someone to dinner, offering a warm bed for the night, could ripple out through someone's life like a stone in a still pond. Meanwhile, in the city, in a high-glass building with gleaming floors and subdued assistants, Al Harrington worked at her desk facing the window, observing light cast over the cityscape. She wasn't that same girl who had crept into Jeremiah's house on a rain night. Something had changed. She still carried the family name, still went to charity galas and posed for pictures, but deep down, she was rooted in a manner she never had been. On her desk was a picture, a small black and white one. Marcus was standing there holding up a pancake, his face silly, syrup on his cheek. Jada stood next to him, smiling hugely, and on the periphery, just visible, was Jeremiah, smiling gently, his eyes level. That photograph kept her anchored. She'd begun a small charity with a different name, nothing glamorous. Unpublicized acts of charity, anonymous donations to schools and shelters, just tiny waves like the ones Jeremiah had created in her world. And when the world was too noisy, when life was too burdensome, she'd glance at that photo and recall, home isn't necessarily a location, sometimes it's a moment. Occasionally, it is a man with firm hands and an unspoken heart who opens his door to a stranger in the rain and inadvertently alters her life forever.